I started out with my mom and my dad. I had a decent childhood. I have four siblings, and we all lived together for quite some time until I turned about 10 or 11. And my siblings kind of went different ways, and I stuck with my mom and my dad. And things got pretty rough for a while. My dad ended up getting incarcerated, and my mom and dad were in a car wreck, and things just really kind of turned upside down for a while. And I was like 17 years old, and I met a man who soon became my husband, and I have two children with him. It ended up being a very abusive relationship, but I met some people through a church down there, and they kind of took me under their wing and introduced me to God for the first time. And I felt comfort at that point in time until my first son was born, and once again things kind of took a turn for the worst. I stepped away from God. I had no faith. I got introduced into drugs and alcohol, and I ended up getting pregnant a second time. I used all the way through my second pregnancy, and I had no idea whether I was going right or left, up and down. I had no structure in my life. I felt alone and abandoned and hopeless and defeated. And it went down that path for a very long time. My son got hurt in 2017 and almost lost his life. And from that point on, I felt like I had nothing left to live for. I tried to take my own life, and God stepped in and didn't allow that to happen. And I went through the system for a while, and I ended up getting both of my children back, but during the time I got pregnant with my third child. Me and my husband had divorced, and I was just alone by myself. I didn't have any support, and definitely I didn't lean towards God. I forgot who God was. I thought that I was alone still. And so I used all the way through my third pregnancy as well. I didn't want my daughter. I wanted to give her up for adoption. Up until I was about 32 weeks pregnant, something in me switched, and I quit using drugs and alcohol. I gave birth to my daughter, and I had, reunited with my kids, but I still hadn't reunited with my higher power, who I call God. And it was just, I was just lost in this huge world with nowhere to go, nobody to turn to. So I moved back to Chillicothe and was with my three children, and that's when I got introduced to a lot harder of drugs, and I gave my children away. I gave everything in my house away. I was isolated from anybody and everybody, and all I cared about was my next drug use. And in November of 2020, I tried to take my own life again, and I was angry. It didn't work, obviously, and I was so angry at God because all I wanted was for it to be over. I was tired of living in the miserable existence that I was living. I had, abandoned my children like I thought God had abandoned me, and I just didn't care anymore, until one day that changed, and I was sitting in my house with no electricity, no water. My children were at my mom's house, and I didn't care if I seen them. I didn't care if they were okay. None of that mattered to me. All I cared about was my next drug use. And so I was sitting in this house, and I was getting ready to use my drugs, and I just cried and cried and cried, and I just asked God to please let this be the last time that I ever use these drugs, because I just don't want to do it anymore. Just please let me die and not wake up. Anything to take me from this miserable existence. And he had something different in mind. I used the drugs that I had, and I made a call to a treatment center up in Columbus, Ohio, Recovery Works, and to my surprise, they said, we'll be there in a couple of hours to get you. And that's where things really, really changed for me. That was September 23rd, 2021. And since then, I went to Recovery Works, and I started to learn a little bit about God there. But it wasn't until I hit Lighthouse program in November that they was transporting me to Collision Church every Sunday, and I was going there and I was listening to the pastor talk, and everything he was saying, it was like he was speaking directly to me, and I just felt like God had a plan for me this whole time, and this is what it was. I ended up getting remarried, and my husband overdosed and died December 24th, 2021. So I was already in treatment at that time, and I already knew who God was. And, if it wasn't for that, I don't think that I would be standing here today. When my brother overdosed in 2020, I used that as a reason to keep using, and I was angry at God, and I would scream and yell in the graveyard at God and just ask why him and not me, and how could you do this to me, and you've already abandoned me for so long, and now you've taken my brother away. And then when my husband was taken away, I used that as, I guess you'd say, an encouragement to keep going. It brought me closer to God. It has brought people into my life that have helped me get through those tough times. I've met amazing friends who go to church with me today, and they enjoy church, and we praise God together, and I've never had that before. I work for an amazing company called Buckeye Clinic, and everybody I work with, they're all in recovery, and more than that, they know God, and they all attend church, and we go to church together, and we praise God, and we talk about what we learned from the sermon. And people come to our clinic, and we get to take them to church, and we get to introduce them to God, and we get to share our story about what God has done for us. And I thought for so long that God was for everybody else, and that I wasn't good enough to be used by God, and I was broken and lost, and who was I? How am I worthy enough? And I found out a sermon I heard yesterday from my pastor at Collision Church. It just so happened to be that that's what his sermon was about. Is there are people waiting for me to share my story, that have been praying for an answer for so long, and me being stuck in my insecurities and feeling like I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy enough. Those people may never find hope because I'm being selfish. So today I know that God saved me for a reason, and he kept me from killing myself as often as I was trying to, with whether it was suicide attempts or injecting drugs into my body. And he saved me so that I could help save other people. And today I know that's my purpose, and today I get to spend every day doing that. And I see my children now, and I have a great relationship with them, and I have people in my life today who genuinely care about me and love me, and they love God as much as I do. And it's from my life being hopeless and miserable to what it is today is just unbelievable. And sometimes I feel like it's not even real. Like, how did I get here? But here I am, and I have a little over a year sober, and I have amazing support. I have an amazing church that I go to. I work for an amazing clinic, and my life is finally starting to become what God has always had planned for me, and I was just too blindsided to see it.